He became a prince out of necessity. He had come to the realization that the future we all hoped for would never come to pass unless someone volunteered to become a sacrificial lamb. It wasn't what he wanted out of life, but he did it anyway. He became a prince in this world without a king. But what exactly did he have to do to become a prince? The answer still eludes me today.
On the 9th of March 2009, the rock band Oasis would release what turned out to be their final single, Falling Down. Less than 5 months later, the band would split, and would putting an end to over 2 decades in music. But Falling Down has a rather strange afterlife. For like a few sort of tracks by Western bands, it turned up in an anime series called Eden of the East. Eden of the East, which ran from April 2009 to later in the year, would be the first series on the Notamina bracket, which is now which has produced series as far apart as Number 6 and The House of Flowers, and which would set itself up as an interesting, esoteric, and at sometimes experimental bracket of anime and visual effect, and sort of would produce some of the most interesting series of early time. But this is obviously Joe's choice. I'm going to let Joe introduce the episode and sort of say a little bit more about why he's chosen Eden of the East.
Well, it's one of my favorite shows, and it's easy to figure out why, because it is about a character named Akira Takezawa who doesn't have much of a memory of many things, except tons and tons of movie references. And obviously there was the opening choice, which was Falling Down by Oasis, who was my band of my adolescence. So it's just anybody who watches this series and knows me will go like, that's you, isn't it? It's like, yeah. Yeah, including the part of it where I'm possibly a terrorist. No, I'm not. But
like a glove.
But anyway. Yeah. So anyway, we have this is a rather interesting anime because it was clearly made for the Japanese audience, but it was also super made for Western audiences, because the first episode takes place in Washington, D.C. And if you listen to the Japanese dub, they actually got people to speak English, all the people who were American. So it has the, like, I wouldn't say authentic Japanese in American experience, because most of the people acting are either non-actors or they are Japanese people speaking English.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was the best, English in the Japanese anime you're gonna get.
Yeah, definitely.
So the story starts out with Saki, who is this girl who's just graduated college with the rest of her class, and at celebration they decided to go to New York City. But she took a side trip down to Washington, D.C. because she wanted to visit what she considered the center of the world. And we might go to meetings and other stuff later. But so she goes to the White House, and she wants to make a wish and throw it in the fountain to hopefully make the wish come true. So she tries to throw a coin in the fountain. Unfortunately, she doesn't realize the fountain at the White House is about 50 feet away from the gate. So she tries to, like, her best to throw it, and then suddenly there are police coming down, and it's like, hey, you, what'd you throw? And she suddenly gets this, like, stunned, I don't know what these people are saying, but I know I'm in trouble look. But quickly, it is dissipated by a truck passing by, and there's like, in the Japanese version, you hear this very distinct, "Hey, you wanna die?" And then suddenly the truck moves, and there is a naked man with a gun, and who is walking across the street and towards them.
The classic DC experience.
This is Akira Takazawa, our other lead, and he just deleted his memory, so he doesn't know what he's doing here, why he's doing it, or anything else that's going on. But what he does know is that this isn't good. So he does a little Looney Tunes getaway thing where it looks like he's latching onto a car to get away, but he's actually hiding somewhere else, which totally wouldn't work in Washington, D.C. A lot of this stuff in this episode wouldn't work in Washington, D.C. because that place has surveillance for days, snipers for days, and a lot of surveillance. So...
Yeah, it's not aged well, this bit. Sort of you throw things across the into the White House in the current political climate. Yeah.
Well, this was made well after 9/11, and in fact, they do make a reference to it a little bit, but this is post 9/11, and it's a lot of how the rest of the world is kind of translating what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So Saki is thrown into this whirlwind thing with Akira. So they are running around town, and he is trying to get clothes. So he borrows her jacket and then runs around, and then somehow convinces a random passerby on the street to give him his pants. And the police are kind of after them. So he's trying to find his apartment. So they have a map to... He at least has a map to his apartment on his phone, which has a concierge on it named Juice, which is, more strange things. So he eventually finds his apartment, and he gets tailed by Saki, who is like, "Oh yeah, my passport and wallet were in your jacket." But before that, he goes to his apartment and finds out that he has a cache of guns, a lot of passports, and, the whole thing just reads terrorist.
Yeah.
So it's like, what am I doing here? But what he does remember is when he's looking in a mirror with a gun is that this feels like Taxi Driver. And it's like, how comes I can remember what Taxi Driver is, but I can't remember myself? So Saki eventually pops up to him, so... it feels like I'm doing a blow-by-blow of the first episode.
Yeah, but I feel like that first episode... It does sort of...
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's like... The thing is, I feel with NEETS is that first episode is so well set up that by the end of the episode you have the entire sort of sense of the series in running. You've fleshed out the two main characters very, very well, and I mean, there's the quality of the series I feel runs on those two characters and their sort of interrelation with each other. But it's also set up like the whole mystery of who the hell is Akira Takazawa.
And also, what is this phone thing, and what is happening? So, yeah, the relationship between the two is important, and it's important we set this up so that, I mean, even though Akira puts them in this weird situation, they have a sort of connection to each other, and that is really felt throughout the series, and it's really good that at least the first two episodes are mostly them just, going through stuff and like hanging out together, because it's important and it becomes the most important thing, and I think the makers forgot about in the movies. But we're not going to talk about the movies today. I'm not one of those people who say the movies don't exist, but I'm not going to say they were good.
Yeah,
but
they're controversial. This I should probably emphasise it is the first. I've owned this series for about 2 years because it's a series. Obviously, I've been highly recommended by multiple people. This is the first time I've watched it, and I can tell you this. As a first time watcher, watch this series. Like, Ignore the films. The films are sort of, if you really want a continuation to this series, watch the films. Okay, fine, it's sort of more, but as a first-time watcher, watch this film, watch this series. It is dirt cheap. It is, probably one of the better of the anime series that have come out of Notamina, out of the in the sort of obviously since the service the particular slot existed, and it's readily available for sort of under a tenner these days, and I think it's on most streaming platforms as well.
It's on Funimation over here,
Yeah.
but you can get Funimation for reasonable. But there are a lot of people who just like go Crunchyroll or nothing. But it is on Funimation because they have the rights over here. But yeah, I suppose we better get back to the thread of what's going on in the series. So she's trying to get back to Japan. She left her suitcase in the middle of things during the chase. So they get the embassy to get her like a floater, a plane ticket, and all that until they can get this sorted out. So they go back to Japan and find out a missile attack happened. So there are suddenly the airport's full and the TV news is just all about this supposed terrorist attack that just happened, and it's apparently the second one that happened after an event called Careless Monday. And the events of what happened, how this happened, eventually like play themselves out. But for now, they're just trying to get home, and Saki is away from her group, who is a group of NEETS. I mean, they're it's kind of an evolution of NEETS, because in the early 2000s there was stuff like Welcome to the NHK, where it's just like, oh my god, I can't stand social everything and everything burns. And then it's just like, in the late 2000s, it's like, okay, we have this, all this social anxiety problem and all of this, but we have to exist in this world, so we have to figure out how we do it. And that's kind of where Eden of the East is, where they're, okay, we have to go to college. Now that we're out of college, we got to figure out something to do. So it's this group of NEETs who are into computer programming. They're trying to do this startup, but some of them are trying to do something else. So it's but meanwhile, Taki, or Akira Takazawa, they call him Taki more in the Japanese version, just because I don't think in English calling someone Taki is the same thing. So, but anyway, Akira, he discovers with his phone that he has a certain amount of money, and what he can do with it is whatever he can think of, except for controlling people's will. So there's Juiz, who is her concierge, and he can tell them he can do whatever he wants, and it will do it, but it will just ring up the cost for him, and he only has a certain amount of cost before it goes to zero. And now that the phone has a number 9 on it, which is apparently his number. So there are other people with the phones in different numbers, and the first person, and one of them is a police officer who picks up his financial stuff, and he happens to be in the area. It's like, wait, number 9 is back. I'd better go see who he is. So he's in this area. So this next one is a cop, and they kind of have a weird run into each other. It's like, where is he? And it's like, hey. And Akira's like, you have the same phone as I do. And the cop's like, are you shitting me? So Akira is this very weird guy who is very into movies and just has a extremely eccentric way about him that just it either rubs people the wrong way, or it's like, well, it completely disarms people.
And I feel that comes across very, very, very. This is one of these anime I would go, the dub is really very, very good indeed. And it's sort of
yeah,
yeah. I mean,
I should put a point here that I know somebody who worked on the English dub. So if you want to say I have a bias on that one, that's fine. But yeah, I went to college with one of the people who worked at Funimation while this was going through their system, and we, were in field production together. So there's my, inherent bias. But the dub is very good. The only thing I would say is the first episode is very different in the dub and the sub, because you can't just have American voice actors or Canadian voice actors speak Japanese and pretend they're being Japanese foreign nationals, and just reverse the situation, because it's not going to sound good and it's not going to be good. It's a little strange.
But I feel that you're always going to have that issue when you do have scenes, particularly. I mean, for example, let's take the series, Angel Beats. You have a character in that who speaks random chains of English, and it's like, okay, this sort of makes sense. This is sort of funny in sort of Japanese, or it sort of makes sense in Japanese because it's like, oh, crazy Westerner. It's like, okay. But obviously, like, everybody in the cast is speaking English. There's sort of limited things you can do with this. You either go, okay, but he might be speaking. I think in the case of TK from Angel Beats, they just have him spout random song lyrics, which is a way of moving past that. But I feel like with a series that obviously does have that sort of issue to get past, you've got to be either ignore it completely, or you've got to play it cleverly.
Yeah. And they just ignore it, which is fine. I mean, it loses some things, but it's impossible not to. So I'm fine with it, and the performances are really good. The only thing I really notice is Akira in Japanese is a lot more dry playful. He still gets a playful out of it, but like when there's a line when they're talking, it's like, actually, I'm a terrorist, and then in Japanese he's just like, kidding. But then in English he's like, I'm kidding. So there is a little, he's drier in Japanese, but the performance still, nails the character. It's just, different interpretations of it. So after this, they go on a quote unquote date where they're going around and figuring out about each other, and they're trying to sort out what's going on. And, eventually the police officer comes into play, and then the rest of the people who have the phones, who are called the Selezaus, or the Selected, and all of them have a phone that is loaded with 10 billion yen, or about 100. I think I'm trying to remember what the exchange rate I did when I did an article on the movies was $87 million. I don't know how much that is now, but it's a decent amount of money, but they are all given the game to change Japan. They use the money for however they want to change Japan, and they cannot take the money and cash it. And if they run out of money, one of the Selechow, who is the supporter, will find them and kill them. They don't know when they're going to decide a victor, but they do decide a victor. There is some sort of thing that's decides a victor that they don't know about. But this all is set up by Mr. Outside, who set up all this, gave all the money, and then they had 12 of them, because he is a soccer fan, and that's how many people are on the field in a soccer game. So, and the Selechow is the nickname for the Brazilian soccer team. So this is all to indicate this is a game to change Japan, which kind of felt right with the zeitgeist, because we had this, we had 9/11 happen, and everybody's thinking about ways to change the world for the better, and then there's this reality television implement that was going around right around the same time. So it's not really it's a game, but it's not really a game show, but it does kind of have that reality show feel about everybody. is in a game playing with reality.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, obviously, you've got to look at what was happening in Japan at this point, which was basically a recession. Obviously, you've got to remember this is coming out in 2009. This is at the height of the 2008 to 2012 recession, and this hit Japan as badly as any other country. And it's sort of interesting to sort of look at this series now at sort of obviously again another point of crisis with obviously the current pandemic, and go, okay, this is how do societies react to major upheaval seems to be a key element of Eden of the East, and sort of it is. And I feel it's like one of the key themes the series does come on to look at in its second half is a country, is there a sort of a sense particularly in a culture like Japan, where there is sort of the idea of the communal whole over the individual. Can a country sort of basically think itself and sort of grow itself and basically manage to sort of help itself out of a recession, or is society now too greedy and too sort of self-centered to do so?
Mm-hmm. And it's also opens up like what are the proper ways to change the country, because there are things that various approaches people take. Like, one of the first people they meet is a doctor who wants to make healthcare affordable for everyone, especially the aging population. And then there's a police officer who is cleaning up the scum on the streets, even though it kind of implies he is just as corrupt as everybody else. But and then on the same thing, there's another one who exists to murder child molesters and the like, and sex criminals, and just eliminate them out of the mix. And there are all these approaches, and it kind of leads up to the main villain, who is like doing these missile strikes. So it's a sorry.
And I feel it's sort of the thing is the series. What perhaps one of the strengths of Eden of the East is, at least outside of its main antagonist, because I hesitate to use even the word villain, because this is somebody's ideology, and this ideology, it's extreme but it has merits, as we'll come on to sort of do when we actually obviously talk about them. But sort of the majority of the other Sarazawas they are basically extending, and I feel this is the way how Mr. Outsider looks at it. These are people essentially who are placed, due to their ideology or due to the sort of how they sort of could assist society. Yes, some of the methods may be extreme, particularly in the case of obviously the character that gets called the Johnny Hunter, who is this obviously the mass mutilating female character who sort of obviously takes revenge upon what I suppose you could call the scum of the earth. But it never goes, she is wrong for doing this. Yes, it goes, okay, she is an antagonistic figure to Akira and to Eden of the East as a whole, obviously, as we'll come on to talk about. But it never goes, no, she's a bad person for doing this. It goes, yeah, she's morally grey, but you can sort of see in as particularly as the series sort of develops her more. Okay, there is like more merits, or there is a sort of a reason to what she's doing, and I feel even though some of these characters are on screen for like 1 or 2 episodes out of a 12 episode run, it fleshes them out enough that they actually become really well developed characters, and I think that is part of the strength of Eden of the East, that it does that.
Yeah, there are a lot of good characters in the show, and the characters really drive the show, even though it's like a high-minded, about big things, that it is what it is really a character-driven show. Like they don't forget that these are people, and the majority of the interactions are not between these people who are playing games against each other, but with Akira and Saki with her group called Eden of the East, because that's their startup company name. They're starting to it's like a search engine for images. Like if you can post an image, it will or if you look at an image, it will tell you what it is. Yeah, or if you look at a person, it will tell you, who they are, how their date of birth and stuff like that, which they don't really get into how creepy that is, but that's another story for another day. But that's their whole thing, is they're a startup company, and there's Osugi, who is obviously very much in love with Saki, and kind of plays a foil to Akira, and is suspicious of him. And then there's Hirasawa, who is he's kind of the de facto CEO or leader, because he's the one who can actually speak, and he's the one who can actually do all this social stuff. Beside Saki was in the organization, but she was leaving for a job, but she eventually comes back because the job market is shit, and they literally pull pranks where they dump stuff on her when she fails a job interview. So that's the job market right now. And then she decides to come back with them, with this new guy who has $10 billion on a phone and can fund them. But obviously on the other end, they're very suspicious, and they're NEET, and they are very suspicious of everybody else in society. So there's that part of it, and then there's figuring out what's going on, why Akira has this life where he owns a mall and he lives in the movie theater, which is, like really on the nose for who he is. And then there's 20,000 disappeared NEETS, and nobody knows where they are, and there's just, the only evidence is picture of Akira with, putting a gang sign in front of them and a note that says, "I'll kill you."
Yeah, which is one of the things that he finds sort of, when he turns up at the Washington sort of weapon cache, and it's like, oh, there's a picture of me with these 20,000 naked NEETS, and this sign sort of going, they're going to try and kill me.
Yeah. So there is this mystery over what he did or what he didn't do, and they try to sort it out because his logs on his phone are erased because he specifically wanted it that way. And obviously his memory is erased, aside from a few things he remembers. Like he remembers his when his mother abandoned him, which is sadly the one memory he has. Like she gave him a 500 yen thing and told him to but I'm a child, they're not going to pay attention. Everybody is an adult if you have money. And that is the lesson he learned when he bought the thing, and he was so happy. Then he turned around and his mother was gone. So that's the only memory he has of his personal life. Which is sad in itself, but it does fit why he's this self-sufficient and kind of really eccentric, and sometimes really, oh god, I've already said eccentric, I don't want to say that again, but
outlandish. Yeah, it's quite an outlandish figure. I mean, I'm trying to think of another figure in sort of, and I feel like he is quite different from a lot of, the typical anime protagonists sort of stuff about this period. I mean, he's actually quite a breath of fresh air, because it's obviously sort of a lot of the anime of this period. I mean, if you look at the sort of the end of the 2000s, it's like, okay, a lot. This is I feel like where my interest in anime sorts to sort of go off in terms of the medium as a whole, because it starts becoming, and this is sort of me on my moral high horse. It starts becoming 15-year-olds saving the world, usually in another world, and usually ending up sort of in relationships with their sister.
Yeah. Mine was a little bit earlier. Mine was like early 2000s. I'm with the Cowboy Bebop group. So I kind of came around, and then there was just that after the anime market crashed, there was this sort of lull, and then Japan kind of took over with, moe stuff. It's like K-On!, which was not really my kind of thing, but there were, a few titles that piqued my interest, and like one of them was the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, which had its original broadcast was really eye-catching. It was really well done, and then there was this, and the only reason I came to it was because, wait a minute, Oasis did an opening to an anime? Okay, now I just gotta watch this. And then you kind of get to the staff, and it was a lot of stuff I watched. Like, you had the director is Kenji Kamiyama, who was the director of Standalone Complex, the Ghost in the Shell series. So he was off that, and then there's Chika Umino, who is the manga author for Honey and Clover, which Honey and Clover 2 is one of my favorite series. So it was like, oh, this is like all-star, and they're putting a lot into this. So I watched it, and it was just like, right away we have Takazawa, who is essentially me, and then there are these wonderful characters, and they interact so well together, and this wonderful plot. It's like all the pieces fell together, and it's just a really amazingly well done series. And I mean, if there's a few things, like the animation is really good. I just the look is a little plain for. I don't know what I'm looking for, but there's not so much of a sense of style, or it's just the modern world, and they do have a kind of way of doing about it. There's like ink splotches in the background, and how they do the backgrounds and stuff like that. Is a style there, but it's not very distinct.
Yeah, it's quite a naturalistic compared to a lot of anime. The sort of of the period. I mean, this is where anime, I feel, starts to do this very interesting thing where what defines the visual style of anime starts to become and obviously we have this idea of the quintessentially 90s anime, the quintessentially 2000s anime, and it's sort of by this point, by the end of the 2000s, you start to get this very interesting spreading out, particularly sort of obviously Murray starts obviously becoming almost its own subgenre of anime, and it becomes a major force that I feel we're already starting to see the back of now. But it also sort of, you get an increasing, and I feel like Notimina is actually is where part of this starts. That it becomes this sort of this very indie, very almost experimental strand of anime. It goes, okay, what can anime do? That sort of and each of these is obviously at the forefront of that, and it's very interesting to look at this series, because it is anime, and obviously it does play upon the typical tropes of anime, but it's sort of it as with the Sky Crawlers, you could do this as a live action series, but I feel there's sort of certain elements that sort of obviously work better in animation, and you do get this very, as you said, with the possible exception of the background, this very naturalistic style of drawing the characters.
Yeah, I believe one of the series they did was, correct me if I'm wrong, but The Perfect Insider.
No, yes, I believe that was another one of the fairly early Notimina.
So yeah, it's very naturalist, and it's made for older people, and it's about kind of older people. So that's although they have done plenty of others, but it just kind of, those are the ones I kind of watched that kind of caught my attention like that. So they kind of have this thing for older audiences, and kind of stories that wouldn't maybe not get made.
Yeah, I mean, this is the same channel that we ended up with, with probably one of the most prominent sort of BL series of the sort of the last, well, two of the most prominent BL series of the last sort of 10 years, which is obviously Number Six and Banana Fish, both of which are fairly unapologetic in what they show.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I feel like this is the other, and obviously you've got the other all-star on the bench here is obviously Kenji Kawai's soundtrack. Obviously we mentioned Kenji Kawai again in Skycrawlers, and it's sort of his score is very, very good for this indeed.
Yeah, which is the second Kenji Kawai score I've had after the Skycrawlers, but it is very good, and it is. They surprisingly have like some. How do I describe it? It's like very 60s jazz in between like the Kenji Kawai serious, international business is going on music. So, but it all works and it's all really good. And the only thing I would say is like the one they have on the song they used to replace Falling Down on the digital release, or like everything after the first episode on the Blu-rays and DVD release, because they did manage to like license Falling Down for one episode on the Funimation release, but then they have this Michael or Belial song that music is by Kenji Kawai, but it's
not Oasis.
It doesn't really work. It's not Oasis Falling Down, which is I can say it's my favorite song by Oasis. It's very weird for me to say it, but it's just like it just hits. I mean, it hits really hard. I think it like got to the reality of what was going on with the world and Oasis and everything else, and it was about the apocalypse and everything coming down. And it's like, well, God, if you're not going to save me, don't waste my time. And then the band blew up, and the world went into a recession, and that it was a feeling of the time. So
and it's a feeling certainly.
It's probably it's
a perfect opening. It fits perfectly. It fits the series perfectly. And I'm going to be honest, and obviously the same issue is because obviously the UK. Within the UK we tend to, unless it's very unusual, you tend to have the Funimation dubs, because obviously the close relationship between manga and Funimation, manga being obviously the major UK distributor. But no, it's sort of and I feel it is the only issue I have with the series. Is that the Falling Down is not on every episode, because it fits the series very, very well. It thematically fits the series very, very well.
Although I will confess, I do like the closing song by School Food Punishment better.
Yeah, it's a good song. No, definitely.
It is. It's like the only problem is it will like. I have to watch most of my stuff at like 1, 2 in the morning, and other people are sleeping, so that it'll have this soft dialogue section, and there's not even like a fade out or anything. It just cuts to credits, and then it's like suddenly the closing is very loud.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh no, I gotta not wake people up.
So I think we've sort of obviously talked about sort of the main outline of the series. I think we're ready to get into spoilers.
Okay, we're about 40 minutes in, so spoiler time it is. Okay, so where do we start?
Boy howdy, Akira Takazawa.
Yeah. He worked so hard to make himself look like a villain even to himself when he wasn't.
And I feel like this is the really interesting thing. This is obviously, a series, and I think the thing obviously that this series gets compared to a lot in the West, although I feel it's sort of missing part of the point of, is the Bourne series, and it's sort of very much of that sort of post Bond industrial espionage sort of spy thriller-esque thing.
And it was the big movie series out at the time, so it wouldn't surprise me if Akira got this cockamamie thing of erasing his identity and then having this room with identities and guns, because he got it from Jason Bourne.
Yeah. And I feel that's sort of something that actually the series works very, very nicely on is this very cinematically literate protagonist, because it's really interesting to sort of see a character develop over, because it is very much, the series is very much about Akira Takuro's finding out who he is. I think that is the mainstream of the series. It's sort of like, okay, who am I? What have I done? Where have the needs gone? Who are these other 11 people I share basically this task with? Who's Mr. Outside? And I feel like it is. And I feel like it answers all those questions at least some of the questions, quite neatly at the end. By the end of it.
Yeah, even though it creates new ones, and there are little clues that let you know what happens in the movie. Like, if you're watching, like when they go to the lab, and you see the semi-trucks moving, those are the GUI servers. Those are what are being moved away, which it's only foreshadowing if you've seen the movies, which nobody had yet. So it was a little clue there. And if you notice, they put like way too many close-up shots on the taxi driver who is driving Saki around while she's trying to figure out where everybody is and what everybody's doing. Because there's this point where her friends are telling her they discovered Akira might be a terrorist, and there's this other end where Akira's like, I don't know what's happening, but I am going to follow these people who are going to tell me what's happening. So, and that's when he meets Mononobe, who is the main antagonist, and who essentially tells him everything. And so she's back and forth between that and trying to figure out, whose side is she on and what she's doing. And there's this taxi driver, and he's a very old man, and they keep way too many close-ups on him. And then there's one shot where he disappears from the rest of the series where they just hold on him for 2 seconds. And I'm going to spoil the movie for you a little bit, but some of the stuff...
I can kind of guess who he is already.
Yeah.
I wonder who it could be. Who is the mysterious old man? Who else in the series is an old man?
Yeah, that isn't anywhere else in the series, but is talked about a whole lot. Even though the big thing you have to know is a lot of the series is lying to you, which is one of the big faults of the movie. Is most of what you are told are lies. So, but in this case, the old man driving the taxi is Mr. Outside. Gasp! But, that isn't resolved here. That is resolved in the movies, and we are not going to talk about the movies.
Yeah.
So,
because I think if I remember correctly, Joe, the movies were a mooted second season, and then they went, let's just make 2 movies, and then let's just do that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always the problem.
And there's this really weird part at the ending where it's an ending for the whole series, but they kind of suggest they want to keep it going. But neither of it is satisfactory. So I'm just going to put it like that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. The ending's the weakest part of the entire series. It goes, now he is a prince. He has sort of spent all the rest of the money to make himself a prince of Japan. It's like Japan has a monarchy. Well, it actually has a monarchy.
They do have an emperor, but King of Japan.
King of Japan.
But I do get what they're. I do like most of the ending, and when they get to the first movie and they Juice goes of making him a king. That is actually really well handled, and mostly because it's Saki and Akira talking with each other and trying to get to know each other again, and that's like the best part of the movies. But what I do like is like this modern magic. Like the setup for the ending is the missiles they're going to shoot missiles at Japan again, and what they are trying to do is they are trying to get Japan to be self-sufficient again. They not rely on America or all of these other countries who have militaries. Like, this is a big to-do for like the Japanese of the 90s and 2000s. It's like we are under everybody else's control, and we want to get out of it. And there are some people who are, you know, military otaku. Like there's a hidden line in Eva 2.0 where the machine that takes control of Shinji's Eva is talking backwards, but it is talking in English. And what it's essentially saying is, being controlled by me is better than being controlled by somebody from another country or something like that. Or somebody else from another nation.
And obviously this leads to what the sort of the approach of Japan's current premier Shinzo Abe. Abe is a very very nationalistic leader of Japan, and probably one of the most nationalist that they've had since really the sort of the end of the Second World War. And a lot of what Abe wants to do, sort of, you know, obviously in terms of is almost sort of preluded in this series, because it's like, okay, I want Japan to be more self-sufficient. Japan doesn't need America anymore. Yada yada yada.
Mm-hmm. And so they're trying to attack themselves. It's like, listen, we need to protect ourselves. We are in danger, even though the danger is yourselves. Which, and it feels like with a lot of these nationalistic people, they do a lot of self-inflicted wounds. And that plays out in Japan and America, Great Britain, and, you know, just a lot of places in the world that don't really have very good leaders right now. So it was originally the first missile attack was made by this his name is Yuki. He's one of the Selichal that is I think he's an anarchist or something like that. He is just, they don't say a lot about him, but he wasn't really a fan of the Mononobe, who's the main villain, who is a former Japanese bureaucrat. And he is, you know, trying to, you know, warp this. He is trying to mold the political zeitgeist, and he's just doing it in the political way. And so he decides to team up his money with, you know, the anarchist and another guy who's just there because I'm already worth 10 billion yen. I don't need this. I just want to be out of the game. So they both hand him his money. So they shoot like 60 missiles at various parts of Japan. So, and what Akira finds out is that he actually saved people from getting killed on the first Careless Monday attack, because the big reason nothing happened is because nobody died. And why nobody died is he recruited these 20,000 people to help him save the country. But what happened was the media was wondering, it's like, why did all of these things happen? Because there was like a fake evacuation because of an earthquake. There were all of these things, drills that happened suspiciously the day or just before it happened, the missile struck. So it's like, did somebody know about this? And it's this big conspiracy. So the Selichal kind of get interwoven into these conspiracy theories, which they meet a conspiracy NEET along the way to read his phone, named Panties, named such because he is a shut-in who is a shut-in because when he was drying his laundry, his one pair of pants flew off, and he was like, well, now I don't have to leave my house anymore. So he just lives in his underwear, and so he's one of those conspiracy nuts, and who is really suspicious of Akira. And they actually become good friends once he figures out, no, that's not what you did at all. You actually saved these people. So,
and I feel like the unraveling of this series, you know, the sort of the slow, and it is really, I mean, it is, considering it's sort of 12 episodes, it packs an impressive amount of sort of stuff into those 12 episodes. But I feel the slow unspooling of the series, you know, the sort of the almost the self-discovery that Akira goes through, and it goes, you know, oh, I'm a villain. Oh, actually, I am the villain because obviously I must have done something to these 20,000 otaku. Oh, okay, I sent them away, but sort of, you know, I did this and that and the other. And it's sort of, you know, combined with obviously his sort of, you know, journey of self-discovery. is so well handled, but I also feel without those sort of the first 2 episodes in which we sort of get to know him as almost, the blank slate, I don't think the whole series would have felt as cohesive and rewarding. And it is a very rewarding series considering it is only 12 episodes long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's 11 episodes.
11 episodes, so
okay.
you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, but in any case, but yeah, it's really hinged on the relationship because it is kind of a romantic comedy in the middle of this giant conspiracy theory chess game between Saki and Akira, who are just, they have a connection with each other that, like, is that you just have between, like, people who, essentially fall in love with each other, even though they wouldn't go, as far to say that, but, and that's what pushes them through this ridiculous, like, even Saki is, like, caught between her, Akira and her friends, especially the friend who is secretly in love with her, who is doubtful of Takezawa and everything he does because he is jealous and he is in love with, Saki. So she is between this, but they have to, like, make this relationship so it's convincing that she would be torn between them and would, side with the guy, this strange man who might be a terrorist. And, it's a part of that makes this a really nice series. And one thing is that this series handles so many things really well, and they are disparate things that don't really mesh well each other, like, romantic comedy and, conspiracy theories and political drama and sort of all of this other stuff. And it all completely gels with this series, and and it makes it something that really stands out even at over 10 years after it's been released. And it's like, most anime has this 5-year window of popularity and then it kind of disappears, and that's kind of what's happened to Eden of the East, but it still stands out and it will still have fans, even though, the movies themselves kind of sunk any hype this thing has, and which is a little bizarre because the movies don't really do that much different, but through their text they just kind of slowly whittle away, like, the suspense and everything else, and, like, nothing matters, and, like, this was only a game because people said it was a game, and the rules didn't mean anything and all of that. And that's really what the movies is. They just completely wreck this structure, and so there's really no point. And again, I should probably not talk about the movies, but this series is really a kind of magic for me because it does so many things well. It connects to me on a personal level because Oasis, and it has the main character who is like, oh hey, that's Joe. And it's exceptionally well done. That's what it amounts to.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those series. There's probably about a 2 or 3 series else that I would compare it to. Like, ironically, the other series I would say it does similar sort of thing to is bizarrely enough, of all things, Madoka Magica. It is this beautifully intricate mechanism that sort of slowly sets itself up and then sort of goes. Once you've got a certain point in, obviously, in the case of Eden, this is the end of the 2nd episode, it clicks and then it just starts gently unwinding and it starts gently racking itself up. And sort of, as it sort of opens, you find out more about the series and, find out more about the characters. But because of, obviously, the strength of the sort of the opening episodes, it sort of gives you a sort of a degree of insight into the central characters and the central sort of relationships between them. and I feel sort of without that structure, these series like this don't work. If you're not interested in self-discovery if you're not going to empathise with the person who's discovering more about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I was as I said, this is the first time I've watched this series. I would definitely watch it again. I would definitely recommend this to sort of anyone who's into sort of suspense stuff or very character driven stuff. As I said,
also if you want an anime for adults, if you're in your 20s, it very hits well if you're in your early 20s or mid 20s, because it is about that time where you're out of college, you don't know where you're going to be in life, and the world is a very scary place right now, and it has been a scary place for the past 2 decades. I mean, even though it was made for a specific time, it was made for this 2009 world, I think it still works now, which is probably a sad state of how we have not fixed anything.
We didn't start the party, etc. We didn't start the fire. No, I mean, what I do like about this series, as I've said earlier in this thing, it is very character driven. It's sort of there will be a character, and it's surprising in such a small-ish cast, that of the central characters, particularly if you are, as you said, at the age that sort of the characters are in this, which is sort of mid-20s, mid to sort of late 20s, it sort of very much goes, this is your show. This is very much, what particularly is now we're sort of sitting in a period realistically where, the chances and the job opportunities and the sort of the general fiscal ability of really, people from sort of 20 upwards is so, excuse my language, completely fucked. That you go, well, what is the point of as one of these characters says quite bluntly, what is the point of sort of working XYZ number of hours a day, so XYZ number of days a week, working 70 hours and basically killing yourself? What's the point of it? What is the point of and it's I feel like this series will come back, will float back to the sort of the public eye now that we are sort of living once again in what feels like the beginning of an economic global recession, and going, okay, but you just made the same mistakes as last time. You fiscally, and I sound very much like the armchair politician here. You've done what you did a decade ago. Yes, absolutely, you've had a outside factor, but nothing's changed. Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
You've got and I feel particularly in Japan where this the demographic is very much. The elderly the population is only getting older. The whole sense of an entire generation, and it's basically the same generation as the protagonists of Eden of the East. Just the younger cohort. You ending up with another lost generation. As sort of I feel that as I think they sort of refer to at least a couple of the generations refer in an economic recession. And it's sort of very prescient that we watch this series now at this sort of time, because it feels as relevant, if not almost poignantly more relevant now than it did obviously in 2009.
So yeah, it probably is a thing that should have lost relevance, but unfortunately, not a whole lot has changed. So. Unfortunately, we still have to live in this, post 9/11 world with constant recession and constant job insecurity, and the world's just really goddamn sad.
But there's cool movies to watch, Joe. So don't worry, it'll be alright.
It's alright, but also what I wanted to say is that how much it makes its philosophy and ideas street level, like. Standalone complex is a really damn good series, but when you come to like talking about what it's about, it kind of gets, even though like the last episode of the first season sits you down and tells you for a half an hour what the series is exactly about, it's a little hard to like at the end it's like, well, okay, so what was that all about? So, but this is like all of the ideas are easily communicated and they're easily absorbed, and it's like it is a very, you know, fun and, you know, accessible series that where you can, you know, get these high ideas and these big ideas about, you know, how to change the world, what is saving your country, and, you know, how does one go about it, and what can go wrong in doing that, because there's quite a lot that actually goes wrong when you try to save the world. In fact, I remember there was an article like that just straight up said, stop trying to save the world at one point. But it discusses this, but it's all within this fun, romantic comedy, political thriller, you know, not high adventure, but it is an adventure, and it's, you know, all of these things and more, and it is just a really damn good series. And I think when I did my top 20 favorite anime that I have, I think I put it at number 5. Just, it's a solid number 5 spot, just because it's like, it's a one I relate to, and it's a solid series on top of everything else.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, this is now the third time I said, you know, you know, this is a damn good series. This is the first time I've watched it. It definitely will hold up to a rewatch. You know, ignore the movies. You know, go on to obviously. I think this is on, as far as I'm aware, this is on Netflix. This side of the Atlantic, and obviously it's on Funimation. On the other side of the Atlantic, the DVDs are dirt cheap. I think you can pick this series up usually for, you know, cheap DVD season money. Watch it, because this is a series that I feel, you know, deserves its time in the sun again. This is an extremely prescient, very well made, very well packaged piece of thing. And hey, Oasis might be coming back, so.
We'll see how, you know, insane Liam Gallagher gets in social quarantine. So
we've given Liam $10 million. He's going to save the world.
Oh God. Anyway, we probably should start wrapping it up, because we're just, you know, kind of circling ideas at this point.
No, definitely.
All right, so what you got for me next time we watch anime?
Well, next time we watch anime, but obviously we have got, as previously advertised, we have a music episode first, don't we?
Yes, where he had the Blue Album for, you know, Weezer, so I picked him Decks and Drums and Rock and Roll by you know, the Propeller Heads, who I am still anxiously awaiting their second album.
Still waiting for that second album. Yeah, which is a very, very good 90s album, and is probably most famous for having that song that's What Is on the Matrix on it. But next time anime, we are turning to one of the most recent series in, obviously, the adventures of the thief Lupin III. Next time we are doing The Woman Called Fujiko Mine, which is going to be fun.
All right. Yeah, it is going to be fun. It's not Advent Children.
No, it's not. So next time is Fujiko Mine. Till next time.
Yep.